being the first tool is at least better than being the third tool.
Nerd alert! Nerd alert!
Hey everyone, it's Damien from DSLRnerd.com. With Canon just releasing the firmware for the 5D Mark III, I want to show you guys how to update the firmware for your cameras. Before I go to the Canon site, this is my website. You'll see saucereffect.com at the beginning of my videos and at the end of some of my videos. This is my business site where I show off my photography, graphic design, production, videos, print, web, blah blah blah. So if you know anybody who needs a WordPress site or some graphic design done, a logo or something, please send them to saucereffect.com. Okay, so I'm going to download and install the firmware for my Canon XSI. I've already installed the firmware for my 5D Mark III that came out not long ago, but I figured I would do this little video to make people more comfortable with installing the firmware. Go to Canon.com and you can then select product information for your part of the world. I'm USA. So then I can go to the top right and do Canon XSI or type in whatever camera. I'm going to click on the little picture here. Down below it says drivers and software. I'm going to select my operating system at this point, which is actually not necessary, but it does then unlock the driver, software, utilities, and firmware. Firmware is what we're after. After another long list of stuff, you say I agree to download. Now normally you would download a zip file which contains the .fir firmware file, but this older XSI firmware for some reason comes as a exe. It's a self-extracting archive. There again, before you download, is the instructions on how to update the firmware, which I'm going to go over in my video in a little bit. But you format your card in your camera, set it to the P mode, turn it on, and then go through the menu to find the firmware settings. So then when you are ready to download the software, when you're ready to download the firmware, you go all the way down to the bottom here and select agree, and then firmware update version 1.1. So I've got my card in the computer already right here, and I'm going to download this file, this exe here, right to my card. I would suggest doing that rather than downloading it somewhere else and then trying to pull it over, because you might get an error. So it's best to download the zip or exe file for your firmware right onto your card there. So I'm going to save it. If I double click that, it will then extract the .fir file and put it onto the disk. Alright, so this is my wife's Canon XSI, aka my backup camera. So we're talking about firmware. The first thing you want to do when you update your camera's firmware is to turn the camera off, set the camera in P mode right there, or auto, either P mode or auto. The Canon website recommends P mode. So you basically know that from the other video that I just had this little 2 GB flash card. It was formatted in the camera, and then I put it in my computer. I put the .fir firmware file in, and I'm going to pop this guy back in. However, before we turn it on, notice one thing you pros have probably been like, whoa dude. Currently there's a grip on it, and you don't want to have this on when you update your firmware, and I'll tell you why. But don't have the you don't want to have the battery grip on, because if the communication between the battery grip and the camera fails, it could be a no-no for your little friend here. So take the grip off like that. Got 2 batteries in them, which makes them great, and I know they both have a charge on them. And note this one's a Canon battery and this one's not a Canon battery. So one's a Canon battery and one's a knockoff battery. This one was probably half the price, but again, do you trust that? Which one are you going to trust for your camera? So this is a bit of a serious matter, updating the firmware. I know it's kind of intimidating. I'll show you how it can be very easy. So anyway, Canon battery, good. Mystery battery, probably not so much. Okay. Oops. I keep knocking the camera. It's not an earthquake. Alright, so that goes back in there. Usually the battery door is stored in this little hollow right here. Wow. Some of them are easier to take out than others. And you have to have the battery door on or the camera won't work. That goes back in at an angle. That just pushes in. I find this way easier to attach than on the 5D Mark III. The 5D Mark III's got little springs here, and you have to kind of push a spring up and get it into the... too hard. This is much easier. Alright, so we got our Canon battery in, and we've got our SD card in with the firmware. So, and I've got it on P, so I'm just going to turn this on. So I'm going to go over to my tools section in the menus. My tools, and on the third tool, third tool. If you're going to be a tool, you want to be the first tool, I think. You know, being the first tool is at least better than being the third tool. Alright, so in the third tool you've got the firmware. It tells me I've got firmware 1.0.4, and actually I just downloaded 1.1.0. So I'm going to hit the set button right there and select that, and it's going to say current version is what I just said. Update. OK. It is loading. There you go. Please select firmware version. Current version is 104. I want that one. It's the only one. Yes, I want to upgrade. Now note this, or yes, I want to update. Note that warning. Do not turn off the power switch or touch any buttons. 50% updating now, not touching any buttons. You don't want the power to fail on your camera at this point. You just hold it like it's a newborn baby. You want a full battery when you do this. As I said, you do not put you put the full battery, make sure it's the Canon battery, at least have one Canon battery. Oh yeah, it came with your camera. "73%, 76%, 78%, 9%, 80%, 98, 99, 100. Update is complete." Awesome. Hit set. Your camera should now boot up as normal. And there she goes. Alright, I have no idea what I got in my update. I didn't really read the fine print, but something good happened. So thanks for watching. If you like my channel, please subscribe.